So Matt and Caitlin, you guys have gone through a tragedy and a trial that many of us could never fully understand or grasp. Why don't you take us back to that almost 2 years ago and what happened that day?
It was August 9th, 2018. It was the last week of summer. School was about to start the next week. So I had made plans with two girlfriends of mine to spend the day at the beach with our kids. We got in the car about 8 o'clock. It was Alyssa and her two girls, Ellie and Adeline, and our two girls, Finley and Tatum. Finley was 18 months at the time. Tatum was 8 months. And if you're doing that math, yes, they were just 10 months apart. So yeah, it was dusk, a lot of cars on the road. So we're driving and I see two headlights in my lane coming at us. I look to the left and I know with all the cars on the road that I can't move lanes, can't go into oncoming traffic. I look to the right and there's no shoulder, bunch of trees. And I know there's nothing that I can do. So I hit the brakes and I veer to the right as much as I can. And we collided. And our car was thrown into a tree in the exact spot that Tatum was sitting.
It was about this time that I had landed in San Francisco. I'm walking from the terminal to my car, and I get this call from an Oklahoma number. And when I answer, there's a woman on the other line saying, "Your family's been in an accident. Can you get here as quick as you can?" Ask some questions, find out where to go, and I sprint to the car. On the drive, found out the hospitals that everybody was going to, and I found out that Tatum was in the worst condition, and she was at Petaluma Valley. When I showed up, her condition started to deteriorate, and for the next 30 minutes, while they worked on her, she was in my arms, and it was that time that I was pleading with God, praying to save her. Came the time where they had to call it, and she had passed away. When I was holding her there, I knew that she wasn't there. I knew it was just her body that I was holding. But that whole time, I wanted to memorize every feature. I memorized her feet, her hands, her face, and I didn't want to let her go. Kate and Finley were in another hospital. I had to let her go. I had to leave her body there at the hospital, but I was comforted knowing that she truly wasn't there, and that she was in heaven. And I went to see Kate. I didn't know her condition or Finley's conditions. But when I showed up, I had to tell Kate that Tatum was in heaven.
As you think about God's grace and his provision in moments where the prayer wasn't answered the way that we wanted, the way that we cried out, as you look back in the rearview mirror of life, in what ways have you seen God move in this tragedy?
I've always said that I trust God. Prior to the accident, I said that and I meant it. I really believed it, but that was very abstract. But my belief was that his vision of protection and provision would align with mine, and that he would protect all of us in the way that I saw fit, right, in the way that I would protect them. And he didn't. He allowed Tatum to die, but now almost 2 years later, I can say, I know that he protected her. We were not made for this world, and he protected her from it. He protected her from knowing and experiencing sin, and maybe something even greater that would have happened in her future that we don't know, right, that he knows. And so I don't like it. Yeah. I hate it. I wish so badly that we had a 2-year-old running around right now. But when I say now that I trust the Lord, it's completely different, because I know what he has allowed us to go through. And so I say, Lord, I trust you with Finley and with Remy, who's our latest addition to the family. And I'm terrified to say that because of what he has allowed us to walk through and what I know he could have us walk through again, potentially. But that carries so much more weight than it ever did before. That has really opened up the opportunity to really just walk with him through the grieving process and say, Lord, this is so hard. How do I get in the car again? How do I put my girls in the car seat again? How do I do this? Right. And it's just created a really special relationship with him, allowing him to walk me through that process and to focus a little less on everything we've lost, which is a lot. It's helped me to focus more on what we've gained and what we had with her in those 8 short months. We had the most amazing gift. Her being ours and us being hers is worth every bit of heartache and walking this earth without her.
And even Matt, as we've talked, we use language like God's better is better. How do you go through something like that as a dad and as a husband, as a family? How can we say that?
You know, you mentioned before how difficult it is to share sermons like this in the middle of tragedy. I needed it in the middle of this tragedy. I needed to make sense of it. And when we're presented with something as terrible as this, we ask why. That's the immediate question. Why? Why me? Why her? Why Tatum? You know, and then I ask, well, why not me? Why not her? How do I accept all of God's many blessings and trust him in the middle of that, yet condemn him at the same time for anything bad that may come my way? Right. This doesn't work. Me making sense of it doesn't work if I can't understand that God loves her more than I ever could. And if we believe that everything is for God's glory and everything is to draw us closer to him, if we believe that this is an opportunity for us to share this story and somebody else can be drawn to God, then she didn't die in vain. So therefore, we feel drawn to tell the story, to accept God's sovereignty, his mysterious sovereignty in this case, and accept that his better is better. Yeah. Because if we're doing what we're called to do, what I believe we're called to do in this situation, it's for us to draw closer to him and hopefully bring somebody else to him. And if somebody else's salvation is what comes from this, and that's his call, then that's his call. And my daughter's and our story it's really his story. It's not our story, it's his story.
You shared about your relationship with Jesus transforming through this journey, being more intimate. You've experienced more joy. Explain some of that personal joy, as well as the way you've seen God move his kingdom forward through your sweet baby.
Something really beautiful about grief is its ability to kind of wipe out everything else. Things you think were important, things that mattered before just don't anymore. Grief may make life more difficult, but it also makes it a lot less complicated. And I really appreciate this new rawness and realness that I have. And it's helped me connect so much with other people just because they ask me how many kids I have. And I hate that question. It's like a punch in the gut, but it is just an open door for me to be able to share that we have a daughter in heaven. When I talk about our family, when I talk about our children, I can't wrap that up in a pretty little bow. When I talk about them, I'm letting you into our story. I'm letting you into our grief. And that just creates deeper relationships with everyone that I talk to. And I think we need more of that.
Yeah, I wear this hat almost everywhere I go because I want to symbolically bring her wherever I go. But also it's an opportunity for a question to be asked. You know, in my line of work, my job, I fly with somebody new almost every week. And when they see me put this on in the cockpit, they see pink lettering, it leads to a question. Yeah. And there's my opportunity to share, to minister. And I don't know for a fact how far it's gone in certain people's lives, but I trust that maybe that story's had an impact on somebody. And personally, kind of we talk about ongoing spiritual transformation. Just because we lost a child doesn't make us experts in faith by any means. You do draw closer to God, and your joy in Jesus is deeper after a trial such as this, but there's still things that I struggle with. And one of them is kind of putting more trust in the promises of God. I have seen that I have this hope of seeing Tatum again, that image of her that night isn't the last image that I'm going to have. I'm going to see her again. But that's kind of trusting more in the promise of God, which is good. That's why he has them there for us. But I've been coming up short, I think, in actually seeking the person of God, the character of God, seeking him out. And that's manifested itself in kind of a difficulty in the prayer realm. I didn't lose trust in God after losing Tatum, but I kind of questioned the need to pray after that. Why am I going to pray if every prayer is ended with, but your will be done? But I kind of relate a lot of things in faith to marriage. And I think about marriage and I think about our relationship and that intimacy. And where would that intimacy and relationship be if I just told Kate, yep, whatever you want, I trust it, do it. And we never interacted.
Yeah.
We never had that relationship. I'm learning now that on top of the salvation, somebody else's salvation that comes from this, God also wants me at a deeper level. And we're kind of going back to the trust thing here, is that we have to wrestle with forgiveness now. There's an 18-year-old kid behind the wheel of that car who was texting and driving when he hit Kate. And that negligence ultimately led to Tatum dying. And every day, we have to think about how we're going to get there. Because we know we're called to forgive. And that act in itself is going to require another big dose of trust from us. And we're going to be right back in this wrestling with God. Mm-hmm. And that faith is going to be tested again where the rubber meets the road.
Is there anything else you'd want to leave us with as a church?
I would say to anyone who's grieving, who's at that darkest point where breathing almost feels like too hard a task, and the only prayer they can muster up is, Lord, help me. I would say lean into Jesus. Don't let this grief define you, but ask him to help it shape you and to take all the good that's possible to come out of it as he can. And I promise he will show up. We can say there's so much joy to be had even in grief. And one thing that we are still learning is that joy and pain walk with you always. We will always ache for her, but we can still live with tremendous joy and hope in Jesus. And I also have to say to those that have a front row seat to someone else grieving, it can be really awkward. It can be really uncomfortable. Death is very uncomfortable. And then throw the death of a child on top of that, and people go, whoa. Don't worry what you're going to say. Just show up. Look for the broken people. They're not always easy to find. I encourage the church in general to just really look for the grieving and show up. Send them a meal. Get in bed with them when they can't get out of bed, because that will make a huge impact.